Welcome, those of you who are here, to the Anti-Abuse Showcase for the Secure Hosting Alliance. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We are going to wait a couple of minutes to get a couple of people in the door before we go ahead and get started, but rest assured that we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for being here today. And for those of you who are just coming in the door, we're going to give it about one more minute and we'll go ahead and jump into things. Thank you for being here with us. Looking forward to a productive morning, afternoon, or evening. Okay, so let's go ahead and get ourselves started. Um, Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time. My name is Christian Dawson, and I am Executive Director of the Internet Infrastructure Coalition. We are going to talk to you a little bit today about anti-abuse in the web hosting space. And in order to do so, I'm going to go ahead for a moment and take over our screen. I want to walk you through a very quick presentation to talk to you a little bit about who it is and what we're putting together to serve as a precursor to sort of understanding what it is we're doing here. You may have seen that the Internet Infrastructure Coalition has announced this as a project of the Secure Hosting Alliance. So let me take a moment to tell you what that is, give you an idea of what it is we're doing. We're currently organizing a group called the Secure Hosting Alliance, and it is designed to be the central organizing force behind the web hosting industry. I've got a couple of colleagues here, Dagurtis Jankus from Hostinger and David Sneed with Web Pros. And David and Dagurtis and I are going to, at the very beginning of our meetup today, tell you a little bit about Secure Hosting Alliance, what we plan to achieve with this group, and what we expect it to be that's beneficial to the web hosting industry. Hopefully, those of you who are in web hosting are going to be excited about it and want to join the organization. And then we'll jump into a little bit about what it is we're going to be doing today, talking about all sorts of really cool success stories in anti-abuse for the hosting industry. So just real quickly, i2Coalition has been for the past dozen years working with internet infrastructure companies. Of course, the web hosting providers are an important and essential component of that space. Really, hosting companies at the heart of the internet's infrastructure. They focus on online presence, data management, security and stability, support and performance. And it's been difficult up until this point to sort of come up with some sort of an organizing tenet amongst all of the web hosting companies, because web hosting companies are fiercely independent. There's not a central regulatory or authority. There shouldn't be. But we've come to the realization that there are opportunities in all of us coming together, working together on making sure that we can do better together to improve on the situation where there's a big race to the bottom on price, and to figure out how we can address new regulatory requirements and deal with the rampant fraud and abuse that's out there. And so we have been trying to organize a group called the Secure Hosting Alliance. Last month, we had a big first meetup of the leaders of the web hosting industry, calling on them to be founding members of the Secure Hosting Alliance. And between now and December, we're collecting members of the Secure Hosting Alliance with a goal of starting this organization in early 2025, January 2025. So this is in part, our drive for new members. We're trying to figure out how we can target leaders in the web hosting space who want to come together to figure out how we can do more together than we do apart, and figure out how we can elevate industry standards, enhance anti-fraud and abuse measures, and foster trust in web hosting and cloud services. That's what we're doing with this organization that we're trying to pull together between now and the end of the year so that we can launch it next year. We're going to be focused in that group on abuse response, on surfacing standards, on establishing principles, on engaging legislators, and on building community. And so we are hoping that as part of this, those of you who are not already engaged with talks about joining the Secure Hosting Alliance will get excited about it, become a founding member of the organization when it launches next year. Between now and the end of the year, we are looking for as many good, responsible hosting providers who want to throw in and help us make a better hosting industry to join us so that we can do that together. And we're working towards the development of a trust seal, which is going to help hopefully connote to people within the target demographic of hosting providers, which are the ones that are really taking a look and being taking a look at the things that we're doing in hosting to build that sort of layer of responsibility and help us fight the race to the bottom on price. So that's what we're doing, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what it is we're doing today with this anti-abuse showcase, where you're going to be learning about abuse report centralization, some anti-phishing efforts, some stuff about IP compliance and reputation, some threat intelligence, some information about spam and block lists, abuse report standardization, and unsiloing and anti-abuse efforts. What we want to do within this group is we want to build a better web hosting environment, and we want to make sure that in doing so, we are not duplicating efforts that are happening throughout the other parts of the ecosystem. So what we really want to do is we want to learn from people who have been doing good works. That means that we need to get out there and we need to listen a lot. And we figured that as part of trying to organize our group, pulling together all the web hosts and out there, we ought to listen a little bit publicly together and learn together as a group so that we can start to identify success stories, amplify successes that are already out there in the ecosystem, and figure out what the holes are so that we can identify the parts of the Secure Hosting Alliance ecosystem that really we should focus our attention on. So the upshot of this is we want you to join. We want you to be a part of this organization. If you're in hosting and you want to build a better hosting environment together, please reach out to i2Coalition afterwards and be a part of the founding members of i2Coalition's Secure Hosting Alliance. I'm going to stop sharing here because what I really want to do is introduce a couple of my friends who have helped us to build this organization and are preparing it for launch. Dagurtis Junkas and David Sneed, and I want to find out from you both what you're excited about learning today. Why don't we start with David?
Thanks, Christian. First, I'm super excited about this initiative. I think that this is a perfect time for something like this to take root. The things that I am most excited about learning from are the presenters who are talking about their anti-abuse efforts. One of the things that I think this organization could be a great catalyst for is helping hosts work together to talk about how to address abuse and abusive issues, both from a business standpoint and from a legislative standpoint. And I think the folks who are on the webinar today are really well poised to let us know how they can help with that.
That's great, David. I hope you'll stick around, and if you have questions between the sessions, help me ask some cool and poignant questions of our presenters today. How about DJ? What are you looking forward to most?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, and everyone, thanks for spending time on this together with us. Really appreciate that. In addition to what David mentioned, To be honest, I'm just curious just to meet everyone and to kind of add some names to the faces and get to know people who are behind this niche, who are behind internet infrastructure, who are behind web hosting companies. The worst thing that can happen, I thought about it, maybe we will just get to know each other better and draw some inspiration from one another. The best thing that can happen, we can actually contribute greatly to making internet a better space for the good clients, and
Yeah.
maybe limit the action of the bad players. And at the end of the day, it's better experience for people that are using our services. And I find it personally like very deeply interesting for myself. And I know some people from panelists and from attendees, I know that this drives many of you as well. So I hope that this initiative and what we're trying to achieve here could be a great, point for all of us to start working on something meaningful together. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, DJ. Looking forward to hearing what you think about our presenters coming up. When I look ahead at what's coming up, I'm particularly excited about our final speaker, almost call them our keynote speakers at the end. They're working on a really interesting program where they're trying to take a look at anti-abuse across the internet stack, and they're trying to figure out how everybody in the internet's infrastructure can sort of agree on terms of figuring out where everything can be going to its right place. The spam is dealt with in this way. Phishing is dealt with in this way. Stuff that is happening when it comes to content administration is happening this way. And they're speaking with all these different segments of the internet's infrastructure. They're talking with the domain registries and the domain registrars and the IXPs and the ISPs. And it's been really difficult up until this point to talk to the web hosts in a singular environment. But with this Secure Hosting Alliance, we're trying to build a place in which a group like that can engage an industry like ours and try to figure out how not only we can do more together as a hosting industry, but how that can potentially resonate out and accomplish more throughout the entire internet stack. So I can't wait. I highly encourage you to stick around till the end because their initiative is really cool. So now we're going to start. We're going to go ahead and go through our showcase. We are learning while you're learning. We're excited about the presentation so that we can figure out what cool stuff is happening in the internet space when it comes to anti-abuse that's relevant to web hosters, so that we can take it in when we're figuring out how we can apply that when the Secure Hosting Alliance starts next year. Our very first showcase is our friend Matt Stith with Spam House, who's going to be talking to us about combating spam and web hosting. So why don't I hand things over to you for Matt to be our first showcase of the day.
Thank you very much, Christian. Now we're going to click the dreaded share button and see if everything works like it's supposed to. Hopefully we see something. It's all sorts of blue and yellow and white. We there? We good? Okay. Nobody's complaining. All right. So, I know that this was called, combating spam in hosting, but wanted to drive it a little bit further and talk about maliciousness in hosting, because combating spam is combating maliciousness, and when you work towards certain things, you're able to combat all of this. So, the very first thing that as everything moves like I don't want it to, the very first thing is just making yourself a plan. And very important is empowering your trust and safety teams, your anti-abuse teams, your abuse techs, whatever, because these guys are in the front line. They're working on this stuff every day. And companies that have empowered their abuse teams, they're letting them communicate with sales, communicate with support, communicate with marketing, and help them understand the challenges that they're facing so they can make proper plans and they can be educated in the way of understanding what abuse may look like, what somebody who may be trying to take advantage of you, because you can have all sorts of controls and whatever set up in your environment. But if the people are letting the bad people into your network, it's kind of moot because they're going to start taking advantage of the resources that are available to them if they're just being let in. And we tend to, like, this is from my hosting days. I was recently at Rackspace about 8 years ago, and we tried to get too complicated with things and not think about the quick and easy wins. Sometimes you're talking about like let's implement two-factor authentication across the board, and that may be something that's going to take you a long time to be able to get done. But then you're sitting there and you still have some type of weak password type of authentication that you're not even addressing that. So think about when you can make quick and easy wins. Don't try and overcomplicate things. Try and do things bite-sized if you can. And that will help you just understand a little bit more that we can get to the end goal of what we want to be able to do, but you can do it in bite-sized chunks and not try and eat the whole chicken at once. And that's, again, talking about that incremental progress. And then you need to continually evolve and continually grow. And you can't just sit there and say, all right, well, we did this, we're all done, victory's done. And you just have to keep on evolving in the way that you're doing this stuff. So some implementation, some best practices. I know that people have probably seen many of these things before, but guess what? We talk about them all the time because they're not getting done on a holistic standard. There's not enough people out there that are adopting these types of things. So that's why we keep on talking about this stuff over and over and over again. But the successful hosting companies out there, the ones that are successful in stopping anti-abuse, let's not just say successful, they are implementing these kinds of best practices. They know who their customers are. They know what normal looks like. And knowing what normal looks like helps you understand anything that's outside of that normal bubble is something that you need to keep an eye on. And normal should be boring. Normal should be something that you can monitor and understand and be able to track. When you're talking about maliciousness, they're going to be all over the map in what they're doing. And having a strict and enforceable AUP. You don't make any exceptions to this, regardless of who's coming on. If a client comes on and they want you to strike something from your acceptable use policy, you can't allow that. Now, there are certain things that you may be able to tweak, like time to cure. If you say you only have a day to do this, and somebody's like, well, we need 36 hours. Okay, you can do something like that. But material changes to your acceptable use policy should not be allowed. And segmenting out your customers. So it's having that shared versus dedicated, because when you're looking at reputational providers or people that are looking at people's networks, they're going to treat dedicated and shared a little bit differently. It's easier for a reputation provider to say, all right, we know that this is just one customer, so we can knock that off and then knock on the door of the hosting provider, say, these guys are a problem. Now, when it's shared, it's much more difficult because you can't come in there and be like, well, we're going to block this and impact thousands, hundreds of customers. And you just need to be able to do that. And next is, just have a avenue for people to be able to report abuse to you, be it a form, be it email, be it some automated API, and accept multiple formats there, especially ARF and XARF. Those are very important standards that are being done, have been developed. A lot of work has been put behind them. So accepting those and being able to process that type of stuff will make your abuse desks be able to do their jobs more effectively. And also, like when you're talking about reporting abuse to hosting providers, the amount of crap that they receive, that you receive, is just phenomenal, because you have people that are writing in saying help and nothing else. And that is something that you need to be able to drive people towards a certain direction when you're talking about accepting abuse reports from people. And as much as you can, automate your abuse reporting. and your monitoring and your enforcement. Now, you need to, of course, toe the line in terms of where you're going to be doing that, but you should be able to automate quite a bit of your abuse processing. And then require and monitor for correct configurations. When you look at a lot of folks that end up with a negative reputation and stuff, and they're legitimate, it's typically something that has to do with how they're configured. They don't have DNS configured properly, or they just they have something broken in one of their systems, which is having them taken advantage of. So require this in your systems, and that will, help in terms of staving off some of that abuse, because anybody who does not do that and refuses to do that, you can just say, well, we can't do business with you. And it's also, don't be afraid to say no to people. I know that abuse techs are great at saying no, but have that mentality to say, don't try and fit a square into a circle. So when you're thinking about some solutions and doing things together, and this is something that, when you look at, how Spamhaus was able to do things, how Maps was able to do things, how even like Tobias is on here with AbuseX. When you think about it, you want to have solutions that are specific, scalable, and simple. You don't want to get too complex. You want to have something that probably can already leverage current things that you already have installed on your network that have these types of things built into them. So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel, and you're not trying to stand up a huge amount of infrastructure to be able to implement and be able to take advantage of an anti-abuse solution. So a couple of established solutions, and I know these are things that Spamhaus offers, but multiple people on the internet offer this type of stuff. But these types of things, DNSBLs, response policy zones, and network filtering, this is stuff that's already on your network. You already have this type of stuff. Yes, you're going to have to buy a feed from somebody, or you can curate your own, but these are things that exist already within your network, and you can apply them already to your network and be able to just use them right away and be able to identify things and be able to monitor things and be able to measure things. So it's not, to say that, this is all stuff that Spamhaus offers, come and buy it. It is to say, these are things that you can go in and use. Now, there may be more examples, and I hope that as we talk throughout these multiple presentations today, that there are more examples for you. But think about these as, your quick, easy wins for you, that you don't have to think about, all sorts of stands up of infrastructure and all sorts of maintenance, all sorts of configurations that you're going to be able to do. These are things that you can configure, and you still need to monitor, you still need to look at them, but it's not going to require that huge investment for you. So think about that when you're thinking about solutions and thinking about combating anti-abuse. Think of what you already have and what you can apply to that is little effort for you. And then finally, join the community. We're talking about a community today. And the last thing is, and share, because we have many people that join communities that come here and all they want to is just to pull in. And while I understand when you're in the beginning and you're learning, that is definitely a thing that you're going to want to do. You're going to want to absorb. You're going to want to be able to get as much information in as possible. But you need to start being able to share your experiences, good and bad, and realize that, when something happens to you that's negative, you may not be the only one experiencing that, or somebody else may be starting to experience the negative thing that happened to you, and you being able to share your experience is going to help them combat that. And we can't do all of this stuff in a bubble. We can't just sit there and say, all right, these are my problems. I need to keep them in my little box and put away. Because if we don't share these experiences together, we're not, the thing's going to keep on happening over and over again. Because many of these malicious parties out there, they want to jump from provider to provider to provider, or they're going to use multiple providers at a time. And having people be part of the community and sharing amongst each other helps them understand, okay, I now understand where this problem is coming from, and it helps you be able to go up and share with everybody. And so everybody is able to understand, okay, this is how I combat this. And that sharing part is very important. And with that, this is my contact information. The good thing is this is recorded, so you'll be able to come and look at this at a later date. But here it is for just a few seconds. If you want to write it down, you can send me an email. You can write me a message on LinkedIn, or you can go to the Spam House website. But I'm not going to be reaching out to you via there. But if you want to do those first two, you can definitely reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to chat with whatever about whatever to see what we can do together.
Matt, thank you so much. And we
Yeah.
at i2Coalition are happy to connect anybody who reaches out to us with you or any of our other speakers today. If you want to get a hold of anybody that you're hearing from. Matt, this is wonderful feedback and a lot of good advice, practical advice for how to deal with anti-abuse from the perspective of a web hosting provider. And I'm glad we started out with you. You ran a help desk in an earlier life at a web hosting provider. I ran a help desk in an earlier life at a web hosting provider. We've connected on that in the past. So I think that's one of the reasons why we have that passion and want to figure out how we help.
Yeah. Yeah. And Christian and I both understand it's soul crushing at times, because as much as you want the queue to be zero, it's never going to be zero.
It's never going to be.
There's a constant battle that you're doing there. So, think about things from that perspective, but, understand that you need to start thinking about getting that engagement top down in your organization.
Well, so before we move on to our second speaker, I wanted to see if either DJ or David had any reactions or questions they wanted to throw out there to Matt.
I do. I have a question. So, Matt, you're talking about know your customer. Know your customers, the kind of traditional idea of know your customer is not generally implementable for a lot of shared hosting companies. When you're talking about know your customer, what do you mean by that?
I'm talking about understanding what normal looks like with your customers. And I know that's not an easy thing to quantify, and it is going to take you time to do. It's not going to be something that you're going to get done in a couple of weeks. It's understanding, who's signing up for your services, and in what ways are they using them. And there's going to be a wide variance there, but in most typical ways, you will know when you reach to a certain point what normal looks like for a customer. And I'm talking about, because with an abuse desk, you're doing more things after the fact. You're doing more things that, once somebody has already gotten into the gate. We're not talking about anti-fraud teams here. We're talking about abuse desks. So they're going to be getting it as, the crap has already happened. We've been notified about it. And they're going to be able to understand, what a normal customer looks like in their little sphere of understanding, because they're going to be seeing, what happens with certain customers, and they're going to be able to do some analyses on these. So I know that it's not an easy thing. I would love to have more discussion about it, but what we were able to do when going back to the rack space things, but we were able to understand like how people would spin up servers in the cloud, spin down servers in the cloud, how people would establish their email services, and how they would utilize them, and how their usage looked for a normal customer. When we were able to get that squared away, and I think that was probably about 6 to 9 months of work, we were able to identify people that went out of that pattern. It didn't mean that we were canceling everybody that was outside of the scope. It just mean we were able to keep a better eye on them. And that was like a 20% of the customer base. The 80% was already that normal, boring stuff. Does that make any sense?
Yep, it did.
Okay.
I think that's helpful context. Matt, we're gonna go ahead and thank you very much for your showcase and your time today and your insights. As we jump to our second showcase of the day, we have as somebody who has run a abuse desk and help desk for a web hosting company, I know that some of the reputation issues that Matt sort of talked about, they have real world ramifications for users within a hosting space. And IP reputation and problems with IP reputation are things that hosting customers often struggle with, and therefore hosting providers struggle with. And I think that there's some interesting work being done by IPXO in identifying IP reputation issues, which is why we asked them to chat with us a little bit about today in their second showcase. So I'm wondering if I can ask Gustavus to come and join us and talk a little bit about what it is you're working on.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, my presentation is not going to be that much about tracking IP reputation because I think that is quite straightforward. But just give me a second. I'm gonna try and share my screen. And let me know if you can see it well. Just a second. My apologies.
No problem.
Okay, let's try this again. There we go. Can
There
you
we
see
go.
it now? Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic.
So
Thank you.
great. So yeah, so I am from i2Coalition, an IP leasing platform, and while we are not a hosting provider, we do have a lot of hosting provider clients that we serve, and IP reputation is something that we hold to dearly because, well, any damage to IP reputation is damaging the assets that are in our marketplace. So hopefully we will have some good insights for you as hosting providers. And to begin with, I would like to define IP reputation for the context of this presentation, because it can mean so many different things in different contexts. So depending on who you ask and what the IP usage is going to be, the definition is going to be different. For some, it's block lists. For some, it's being able to access certain websites. And for mailers, it's obviously mailing reputation, which is tracked separately from block lists. And for the context of this presentation, I will be leaving out mailing reputation because I don't think it's very important for hosting providers. Mailers generally tend to keep mailing reputation, keep track of it and maintain it by themselves, and all of the variables that compose mailing reputation, such as open rates, the volumes that they send, whether they're using genuine email addresses, and if everything is configured correctly, is done by the mailer themselves. So the hosting provider does not have much influence over the mailing reputation. But private and public block lists are something that everyone should be taking into account, because not keeping track of them is going to cause problems down the long run. And so how does IP reputation happen for a hosting provider? First of all, a hosting provider onboards a malicious user. It can be either a malicious user or an unwitting user, a user that does not have the technical knowledge to properly set up their servers. And then the setup part happens. So the user, either the malicious user or the unwitting user, sets up their server. So the malicious user puts on whatever software they're going to be using, sets up their mailing server to send out spam, maybe download some programs. Or the unwitting users download some infected programs, puts some backdoors into their machine and allows malicious users to use them. And then malicious actions starts taking place. Yeah, so the malicious action can be just about anything from the DDoS attacks, spam, hacking, scanning for vulnerabilities, all sorts of things. And the victims of those malicious actions will start reporting those actions. They will report them to your abuse desk. Some of them will, some of them won't. Some of them will report them directly to block lists. Or the victim themselves might be trapped, set up by various block lists. which will in turn cause reputational damage. And you can prevent it on the first 3 steps. You can prevent the damage part on the first 3 steps, either on onboarding while the machine is being set up, or monitoring the actions of your clients. So stopping it in the tracks. We at i2Co, we primarily concentrate on the onboarding because we don't have any means, we don't provide any infrastructure for our clients. They use their own, so we cannot control their setups or monitor their actions directly. So we are putting all the efforts on the onboarding and knowing our clients, working our terms of services, all sorts of fraud prevention, checking payments, multi-factor authentication, all these kind of things. But as hosting providers, you have a lot more power and you have a lot more control. So you can work on the setup of your clients. The first go-to example would be blocking mailing ports. That will stop most spammers in the tracks. If you open mailing ports for trusted and known clients only, and you include some hurdles in the way to open the ports up, it will deter most spammers because they will move to a different location where it will be a lot easier to start their spamming campaign without any additional efforts. So the more hurdles you put in their way, the less likely they will be to use your service. Also, securing images is something I would advise as well, because a lot of times that when we deal with our hosting providers, when we send the user post, our hosting providers, they come back with the client server was hacked, client server was owned, we reinstalled it, we secured it up. And if the securing up of the server was done in advance, the problem could have been prevented entirely. So just keeping your images up to date, doing the necessary steps for the client if possible, and if it's not possible, then educating your clients, giving them the necessary resources and tools, because a lot of users will not be as tech savvy and they will not know how to set things up properly by themselves. And then also monitoring your client actions. You can monitor what they're doing, you can monitor their traffic, you can set up some automated rules to detect also, for instance, the DDoS attacks. You can detect them while they're happening and just block them at its tracks based on the traffic or irregular traffic that's happening. You can monitor scanning of vulnerabilities, all sorts of things you can do set up automatically without any humans actually inspecting the packets, but also giving you some level of protection. And there's not going to be one good solution for all hosting providers. You will have to sacrifice user journey for abuse prevention. And abuse prevention is definitely better than mitigation, because once abuse has already happened, once reports are already coming in, the damage has already been done. You might already be suffering from some level of IP reputation damage, and not all of it is going to be fixable. Because as I said, like the private blocklist part is blocklist where on a firewall level, different servers might block your IP address for their own self, for that particular one server, but getting out of it is almost impossible, because you would have to find the owners of the server and try for them to manually remove that one IP from their firewall. So all preventive measures are way better than trying to mitigate the damage that was already done. And all of those measures that you will take will have an impact on your user journey. So the more preventative measures that you put in place, the more you will have to sacrifice on your user journey. Because the best user journey would be a user signs up with Gmail account, signs into Gmail. 1 minute later, he has a running virtual machine and he can do whatever he wants. That would be the best for the user. But for you as a hosting provider, you definitely want to invest in knowing your clients, being able to prevent them to sign up easily with a new email address, so keeping track of who is who, maybe using phone numbers, tracking payment methods, having different means to identify all terminated users. Because if you don't have those things in place, you will have a hard time dealing with abusers who are returning every time you ban them. And if you do not do your due diligence, it will eventually cause irreparable harm to your business, your reputation, and it's better to take action in advance. So here I would like to give you some example cases of things that I've seen from a i2Co side. So we had a very large hosting provider signing up. It was, at the time, I think it was one of the top 20 biggest providers that we had as clients. And they started getting some spam house SBLs. And so we suspended them while they deal with it. And the issue that they had, they did not have a clause in the terms of services which would allow terminating user services due to them being blacklisted. Because a spam host listed those subnets because they were being used as spam, but there were no abuse reports generated and there was no evidence provided for them. So they were sort of locked, and they had to either provide refunds for the clients or allow them to keep using for the term, for the remaining of the duration that they have paid for. And while there were just a few SBLs, we allowed that. We allowed them to keep the ranges till the end of the billing cycle, and more SBLs kept on racking up. And at some point, we stopped giving them the time, because we do not tolerate listing whole ranges in spam house. So we started terminating those ranges, and they had to issue refunds for the clients, which caused huge monetary damages for them. And eventually, we had to terminate the client because they could not keep a lid on this whole spammer problem. And here's another example case. Also a similar, slightly smaller hosting provider that had signed up, and they also had the same problem. They started getting some SBLs a while after they had signed up, but their reaction was a bit different. They terminated all of the clients immediately after we reported the SBLs and implemented port blocking for all new signs up. And after that, they didn't have many problems, and they're still acquiring with us now. They did have a few more spam house cases later on, the case that this is based on, but it was from ranges already leased out previously to different clients. They were previous clients predating the port blocking, but once those were dealt with, there has not been any more spam related issues for many months now. So yeah, so to summarize, I would like to say that preventing IP reputation damage is definitely worth the cost, because if you do not prevent it, dealing with it is going to be a lot more difficult, and some damage that's going to be done is going to be irreparable. And if you do not take action, it might even bring your whole business down at some point. And don't wait for the problems to come up, because if you prepare in advance, you will be in a lot better position. All of the preventative steps that you are going to take after the problems rise up, you can take them before the problems come and prevent all the problems. But you will have to take those steps either way, sooner or later. So I suggest taking them sooner. And don't hesitate actually once the problems come up, because they will. As Matthew said previously, it would be great if we could have zero abuse, but we won't, especially as hosting providers. You will not have 100% abuse-free servers. You will have bad apples slip through, no matter how good your prevention is. But the more you invest in it, the less of those cases you're going to have, and the less of them you're going to have, you can act swiftly and terminate the remaining ones, and keep your IP reputation clean. And thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Gustavus. As somebody who I ran a abuse desk. Dealing with those types of IP reputational issues that affect your customers are some of the most difficult engagements that I ever had with customers. So this resonates a lot. I'm wondering if before we move on to our next showcase, I can ask either DJ or David if you also have any reactions to Gustavus's presentation.
So yeah, I liked the kind of technical discussion, and particularly the bringing in the IP sphere, which is really helpful for shared hosting companies in dealing with abuse issues. So that was very helpful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time with that. I'm certain that there will be people that want to learn more about you and what it is you're doing, and we'll make sure that anybody who reaches out gets your information as well. We're going to go ahead and move on to our third showcase, and we're going to introduce our friends Chaz Tomlin and John Morgan, who are going to be talking to us about threat intelligence and how hosting networks can leverage threat intelligence to do better on their networks. Very excited to hear what you have to say about that. Gentlemen, why don't I throw it right to you?
Thank you,
Awesome.
Christian, very much. And we're just really pleased to be here today. Hello, everyone.
I'm John Morgan, and it's my privilege to lead the threat data enablement team over at Recorded Future with my colleague Chaz Tomlin, who is the brains of the team, and I'm thrilled that he'll be here to talk to us a little bit about what it is that we can offer the Secure Hosting Alliance.
Great. So, just a little introduction around Recorded Future as a company, as we're sort of talking a little bit outside of the pure hosting arena. You might not have heard of us. I'm sure everyone's heard of Spamhaus and IPXO. So very grateful to the presentations we've seen already. So Recorded Future is probably the world's largest pure play threat intelligence company. It was recently purchased by MasterCard. MasterCard obviously hugely invested in tackling abuse and fraud across the whole cyberspace. So we're really excited about that acquisition. We're not too sure how it's going to impact us. It's early days at the moment, but it looks very promising in the way that the industry, the threat intelligence industry, is moving. As John said, we head up this sort of small team within Recorded Future called a threat data and enablement team. And John also deeply involved in the i2Coalition team there. And something that we wanted to bring to the table here is what we call our threat partner exchange program, and something that we can sort of demonstrate the value of during this presentation. John, anything else you'd like to add there?
No, I think that's great. We'll talk a little bit about Recorded Future and our capabilities, and then with whatever time is remaining, Chaz, I'll be happy to give an overview of the Threat Partner Exchange Program and how it can contribute positively to this community as we move forward.
And I'm so grateful for actually the order in which Christian had put these presentations on. It's fitted so well, just to sort of hear from Matthew about sort of doing those standard secure and abuse handling sort of processes that everyone needs to get with. Then a bit of an introduction from Gustavus on IP reputation. And I like to sort of use this analogy around threat intelligence. And threat intelligence is very much like a spoiler on a car. And for a lot of people that don't have those basics, things that Matthew talked about early on, it's a little bit adding a very fancy spoiler to a not very fancy car. No offense to anyone who owns a VW Beetle, by the way. It isn't probably going to make that much difference to those organizations. And it really is a much better use of everyone's resources to focus on that great guidance that Matthew sort of gave early on, and handling and defining standard abuse processes, policies, AUPs, and so on and so forth. Then for those who are well established, have those sort of policies and procedures in place, threat intelligence is a little bit more like an F1 car sort of spoiler, where we can start to actually adapt massively how your security posture sort of changes based on intelligence that we are collecting and leveraging from all our sources. And in some cases, it will enable your organization to really be a market leader. Also in this space, though, we get a sort of a strange scenario where those people who are very good and very mature in the security space will enable the whole industry as a whole to be able to react and take action against specific threats, because they might be able to expose some of those activities that those threat actors are doing on their network. So rather than playing whack-a-mole, it might be better for us to contain, monitor, and watch threat actors, how they use services, what they're abusing, and then rather than, as I say, sort of taking out individual items, is have a much sort of wider group effort and taking care of these threat actors and taking out their infrastructure at a sort of a bigger scale than just within a single organization. So my point here really is threat intelligence. We are a threat intelligence company, but it makes no sense if your capabilities in security and abuse handling are low. It doesn't mean that you sprinkle some threat intelligence on top of it and it magically fixes your problems. No, you need to do those basics first. So your threat intelligence use should be proportionate to your capabilities within your organization. And just some of the modules that Recorded Future, and this is not a sales pitch, is probably a good way to sort of segue into our partner program, John, here, in which we are, as a company, willing to give and share these services to our partners at no cost to them. I don't know if you want to speak about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we, as Chad said, this is not a sales pitch. There are other companies out there that do this. One of the privileges that Chaz and I have is to be working, with Recorded Future, which is just truly committed to investing in these community development efforts that really help to move the needle on what we commonly refer to as the mission, which is kind of what we're all here collectively doing together today to identify ways to reduce abuse and other threats that we are all dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so Recorded Future as a whole, in terms of our threat intelligence capabilities, the company is built up, of course, we're a SaaS company. We have 9 different modules, and Chaz and I have the privilege of working on this very small siloed team off to the side in Recorded Future that is allowed, we're giving kind of special privileges to work very closely with community members who have demonstrated a commitment to making the internet a better place, as Nagurdas said here at the beginning of the talk, right? Like that is how we're going to be able to fundamentally move the needle together. This is work that Chaz and I have been doing together for 2.5 years. Each of us separately have been working with different types of network operators on a global scale for the last 15 years. Chaz a little bit longer than I have been. The 3 modules that Chaz and I kind of pulled out that we wanted to highlight for you all as possibilities in terms of things that we can offer to the community through our partnership program is our attack surface vulnerability module, the threat intelligence module, and the payment fraud module. Now, obviously, in a short amount of time, very difficult to go into any of the very specific details of any of these 3 modules. But we'd be more than happy to have a sidebar conversation with any of you to answer any questions that you all have about how we can leverage these modules in this community building effort. Attack surface intelligence really helps us to track tech stacks and their associated vulnerabilities by continuous identification of exposures to what malicious actors online are going to be able to see And of course, alerting is a standard built in to that module in terms of what actions need to be taken. Our threat intelligence module is really where Chaz and I live. That's where we spend our day-to-day work. And basically what our responsibility is very specifically is to work closely hand in hand with network operators globally to identify where the APT or advanced persistent threat actors that we track are spinning up new servers, and who, more importantly, who are they targeting? How are they targeting them? And how can we neutralize the threats to customers, infrastructure operators, critical business and infrastructure, et cetera. Finally is payment fraud module, which is something that could be very important in everything from know your customer to other types of anti-fraud and abuse type activities. And so we'd be happy to spend more time with any of you individually or as a group to share more about the specifics about these modules and the other modules that we have available in at Recorded Future, and as Chaz was mentioning, that we are privileged to be able to offer through this partnership program in service to the i2Coalition and the Secure Hosting Alliance.
Excellent. Thank you, John. We'll give you all a sort of a little bit of an example. It's not perfect. I'm slightly sad to hear that everyone thinks we won't get rid of abuse, although obviously that keeps me in a job. I would definitely prefer to be a farmer looking after some chickens or something, though, than doing the day-to-day job. So very happy if we are able to get it to zero. But this is a case study where we worked with a hosting provider, and I feel sort of the hosting provider pain here, because this is not an outright sort of malicious hosting provider at all, but was being abused by threat actors. They didn't really know. They weren't sort of turning a blind eye to it. Then a threat intelligence company went and sort of made a big splash on the internet and said, "Hey, these guys are really bad." Wasn't
Not us. Just to be clear.
Wasn't us, and sort of very much highlighted this company, and it got into a lot of media outlets, and we started working with the hosting provider to just share with them our intelligence, and then they shared back with us things that they were seeing, so that we could just start to make an impact on the malicious activities that were taking part on their network. Like I say, it wasn't perfect, but we definitely caused a sort of downward trend across the sort of time working them to impact their the malicious operations taking part on that network. And that took sort of, a lot of our data is available through API feeds. They could integrate it with their abuse system, early warning of systems that are behaving badly, and so on and so forth. So that was a sort of a good news story. We shot ourselves in the foot there, because this great wealth of threat intelligence information, because there was all this malicious behavior going on, we mitigated it, and we've ended up with sort of knowing less about them. But I think we've done that's done some good for the internet there, and that's really what we're about. We're looking to partner with people to make a tangible impact on abuse, and making the hosting world a secure place. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaz. And thank you, John. This has been very helpful and informative to me, and I hope others as well. I wanted to see if there are any thoughts from our from my colleagues before we move on. Ready to move on to our next DJ.
Yeah, maybe I can comment this time. So Chaz, John, thanks for your presentation, and thank you for your time. What excites me about all of this is, at least in theory, the more of us join some sort of initiative similar to what you presented, the more data we will collect, and the more data we will collect, the better we will become at identifying these bad actors, and hopefully we'll be able to react fast, no matter how fast they will jump from one provider to another. And at least in theory, that would help with the margins and with end good client experience. So that excites me a lot.
DJ, thanks. One of my goals is to make sure that Chaz can become a chicken farmer, as he would like to be. And if we're able to collectively work together to put more data into a graph like we were able to show you on the case study, and move the needle in terms of abuse and malicious activity online, that is something that is a realistic possibility. So thanks for your comments.
Love it. Well, great. Thank you guys so much for your insights here. I really appreciate it. I am excited to move to our next showcase. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being with us for this first hour of our showcase series. We've got an exciting second hour, so I hope that you stick around for it. I have talked about how excited I am about our final presentation. This is the final presentation is one that I've been in conversation with the groups that's working on it alongside my friend Alan here, who I'm going to be bringing up now. Alan, I know that you're going to be talking to us a little bit about threat intelligence as well, but you know, really zeroing in on some ways in which hosting providers can actualize on it. We're going to be talking a little bit about phishing.
Correct. Absolutely. So let me just
take it
again,
away.
Thank you, Ken. I'm hoping you can hear and see this properly.
Yes, looks
excellent.
great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so just like the previous speakers, I suppose I'm coming at this from a slightly different point of view. So Clean DNS, very much the vast majority of our clients at the moment are at the domain name level. So we've got the registries and the registrars and a few people who feed into that. So what we're kind of very, very thankful to be able to present here today is to talk about how we think that the next stage of development and us being able to work with clients such as on the domain name level is actually bringing a lot more information and data sharing and capabilities from the data we're seeing, working with people in the other layers, specifically in the hosting layer, and being able to, I suppose, supercharge our ability to deal with abuse on both sides. And obviously the biggest one for us that we see every year is on phishing. And phishing, I mean, luckily I'm talking to a group of people here who are very, very clear. But I wanted to highlight before I jumped into, showcasing is the current state of play. Basically, how has it been for us as we've been dealing within this specific industry, the DNS abuse industry, but also looking that it's the same problem across the stack. And there are three influences which are big for us. And I think we've talked about this already, which is wonderful. So I don't have to spend much time on this, but it is, the legal shackles. We're bound by both legislative and contractual obligations. So the contracts that we have with our clients, the contracts, say in the DNS industry that they have with people such as ICANN, but also how legislators are coming in and putting a lot more pressure on companies, not only to do good, but to be more open and transparent in how they're doing that good. So the Digital Services Act obviously is springing straight to mind there, where it's talking about non-arbitrariness. And how do you ensure that you are taking actions? You're ensuring that you have the backup for those actions, and it's that you're taking it in a good way. We also talked, and I heard this in the last presentation as well, about the reactive limitations, about playing whack-a-mole. We have to be very careful, especially in the domain name industry, where you have so many people saying you need to do more. But a lot of the point is, yes, we want to do more, but we need to do more responsibly. And we can't just work on inference. We need to work on having evidence as well. And that is one of the big things that we in Clean DNS have worked and kind of. In fact, we pivot effectively on that. We talk about evidence-based escalations. And then obviously the next thing we look at is politics. But in this industry, there is an awful huge tendency of pointing the finger, blaming, saying, you need to do this more, we need to do less, you need to do more, and you're not doing enough to deal with abuse. And that unfortunately distracts us from actually having conversations like we're having here today. And those conversations are vitally important about how can we work together, not against each other, in order to bring, and have that impact that John was talking about, like, and to have that impact specifically to prevent abuse from happening. So, and then the core, which is always for me, apologies, I'm a lawyer, but we cannot suspend due process. We need to make sure that at the end of the day, when an action is taken, that we are able to stand over that action, that we can show how that action was taken. Now, the difficulty there, of course, is at scale. How do you do that at scale? So our core principles as Clean DNS, and what we do is we are one of those intermediaries. We provide the service for the registries, the registrars, or other clients that need to have the information, get the information gathered, and to take decisive actions against abuse that is occurring through their services, through their platforms, where they are appropriate to do so. So for us, it's important to say that there is no action without recorded evidence. That's the first thing we say. We've stated very clearly. And that was to cut through an awful lot of the noise that is in the system. There's an awful lot of reports that can be received, but those reports do not necessarily mean that their action can be taken because they're not being evidenced. The second thing, and I think it's important as we're expanding this conversation away from just, the view of the domain name industry, but looking to incorporate the broader stack across the internet and all the role that we have to play, is ensuring that the appropriate action is being taken by the appropriate party at the appropriate time. Now, that is at its basest, purest level. There is always going to be nuance where something is so important that whoever gets on it first, the impact can be so grave that whoever gets that report should probably deal with that first. But they're niche examples. The baseline is it needs to be an appropriate action taken by the appropriate party at the appropriate time. And you'll see at the bottom there, I talk about collateral damage. We all have heard the horror stories of potential for collateral damage at a domain name level. Also, we do not want to take down an entire domain, for instance, where there is one piece of content that might be of issue. And that is much more appropriate to be dealt with much more surgically than at, say, a hosting level or beyond. But also being able to share that information with the hosting company, being able to share that information maybe with the service provider or the social media site to say, we know that this is occurring, we have evidence that this is occurring, but we are not the right people to take action. Are you aware of it? Can you take action? If not, or can you share more data with us so that we can help? And I think that's where we're moving towards, is that we're trying to get out of our silos and we're trying to ensure that the more we share across the stack, the easier the response, and in fact, the faster the response and the more scalable the response, because it's not just on one company's shoulders. It's something that we all share together and help each other to make the right decision at the right time. So the sum total of that is just to say what we're dealing with is that a report of abuse does not mean that report is substantiated or indeed actionable by a particular operator. So that to me is a core thing that runs through, and how we need to move forward in the scalability is ensuring that we are talking better together. It's a simple thought, but funnily enough, that's something that we've argued for 8 years in anti-abuse work at the level of the DNS. So just from a Clean DNS point of view, for many years, the easiest thing that was for us when dealing with phishing specifically was to ensure that we got that contemporaneous site of a phishing. And that is, a report comes in, we look for the evidence of the screenshot of the phishing occurring. And with that evidence, that was probably the gold standard. We would take that screenshot, we would escalate that screenshot, we'll get a takedown. And if the registrar doesn't take it down, then we take it down as a registry. Now, I will just say that is if our client allows us to do that, or we report it to our client and we say, there is an evidence of this. The benefit of that is that it's a very high quality, high confidence escalation. You know exactly what's there. You're seeing it, you have the evidence in real time, and you can take that secure action. It's transparent, it's reliable, and it's not arbitrary. So for a provider, that is the gold standard as far as we're concerned. The thing is, and just to show you a little bit of our evidence over the last few 2023, this is just giving an insight of the escalations that we have. Now, underlying this, we received, or should I say our system saw 5.3 million reports of phishing last year alone. Of that 5.3 million, only 117,000 of those reports came up to the level of a threshold for proper escalation, or indeed that we believed that there was some merit in those reports, or there was just so many duplications of reports, or there was things that had already been taken down but still reported to us. So there's a huge amount of noise that we have to get through. And at the end of the day, what we came up with was we escalated 73,000 domains, which I don't like the term malicious, but I'm going to use it today just for ease. So malicious domains, domains that were registered for that apparent abusive purpose. What's more important for this audience, however, are the other two columns, the ones that are under the compromised, the ones that we see that there was some form of compromise, that we're not going to take down the domain. We're not going to in any way do that because it's something has happened in the delivery of that content. It's not the domain, it's something else. Somebody's gotten in and then presented that issue. Only 2,600 of those reports that we sent through were in that column. And then 41,236 were the reports that we said, hey, there's probably something here, but there's nothing we can do because we can't get the evidence. And for us, there was a bit of a turning point where we said, look, yes, the gold standard is important. However, we have another 43,000 in 1 year alone just for phishing that we don't have enough evidence. And it's, our system is aimed to getting the evidence to support these escalations. And what the conclusion simply is, we need to talk better with our reporters. We need to talk better with other layers of that stack so we can get the information that we don't see, but you could see on a very, very clear basis. So we said, how do we improve that? And how we did that is that we're thinking of moving towards a much more threat intelligence based. We've been listening and seeing evidence-based escalations and takedowns for many years now. And we have an absolute gold mine of data underlying that. Infrastructure queues, we have trend analysis, we know in certain instances who are the hosting providers across the vast majority of these instances. Some of them would be considered perhaps bulletproof hosters. We see flagged terms in registrations. We see flagged terms in actual second level domains. So pulling all that information, looking at the evidence that we've reached and taken from over years, we said, okay, can we build a case that's not just inference? It's not just saying, these look bad. It's that these are bad because we have seen this over time. We have seen the ability that we know what the indicators are here, and we can actually pull right back to that. Another innovation that we worked on then is maybe an innovation for us, but straightforward and potentially for many. But we knew that anything that we have had an action taken on is because we have evidence. So we set up a sinkhole infrastructure, and that sinkhole infrastructure is listening to only domains that have been suspended for evidenced abuse. We know what the abuse was, we know what the evidence was, and we can say that all the traffic coming to these domains are evidence. So how can we actually use that to then pivot right back into our system in order to, again, assess the threat of similar type situations with all the data points that we have. So our goal is to take all these data points, yes, the gold standard being exceptionally important, and we will always have that gold standard, but how can we add to that? How can we make the evidence that we are presenting to our clients more nuanced and more layered, specifically so we can tier very quickly with an idea of scalability that this is we have 5 or 6 elements of evidence, not just the screenshot, but we can see all these basic elements underlying this as well. And can we demonstrate that it's more than just inference, it's evidence of threat intelligence, evidence-based threat intelligence, for want of a better term. And that's what we're working on at the moment. And the benefits of that is we can create reports that are not just based on the obvious evidence, but on an accumulation, or as I have said, the preponderance of the evidence there is that it supports an escalation, it supports a takedown, and it is much more secure. And it's based on evidence that we see every day. Another important thing, I think that was mentioned earlier about, again, when we're looking at scale, if we can tier those reports into having much better, more nuanced evidence, not just a screenshot, but a screenshot and infrastructure queues, and those other machine learning techniques, that can support automation in a large number of cases. In fact, we're seeing a very large uptake where we would love to be able to say to clients, hey, you could actually automate these greatly. And we're currently seeing how would our false positive, false negative rate be? And we're looking at very, very high degrees of certainty in our system. And then whether or not we can just find additional information to share with others as well, because we're not just looking for our clients, we're looking for our other clients. How can we take the information that we've seen and apply that to situations that we're seeing perhaps in other clients. So again, we were talking earlier about how they change and swap. Now, the next thing, and I think this is what brings me to a bit of a close today, is how can we help, and how can we help each other in bringing forward, not that we're working in these silos, but it's how can we help each other. And the first thing and the most important thing for us is we need to share data more. We're working with data that we can see on a day-to-day basis, dealing with very successfully on dealing with phishing based on golden standards. However, if we can get more data, the data of that 40,000, those 43,000 domains that we saw last year but couldn't evidence, and able to present that in the evidence that we have to other people and say, hey, what do you see behind your systems that you would have much more readily access or available access? Can you share with us, or we're happy to share with you? And then when we create that entire realm of sharing together and across the stack, and I can't emphasize how important that is, we are all being focused on, as we have pressure on one side, you have pressure on your side, but we're all trying to fight the same battle. And with the data that you see and the data that we see, it makes things a lot easier that we can actually bring that level up to, we are over 50% certain that this is evidenced abuse, and then we can take it down. But also not just relying only on a domain name takedown, but on a takedown at the hosting level, or again, at the service provider level. It's more targeted, it's more appropriate. None of us care about the glory of the takedown. We are just wanting to ensure that the impact that abuse is representing has been dealt with, that we are stopping it before it becomes a bigger problem and impacts innocent victims. Yes, there are absolutely great benefits for us as companies, because then the reputation side of that is much more mitigated. We're able to say, hey, we're actually doing a lot more. So I've run out of time, which is unfortunate, but I could keep talking about this for an awful long time. But what I will leave you with is that there's an awful lot of data that we have, but there's also an awful lot of data that we would like to have and help other people obtain, share, and receive, and to do so across the stack so that we can actually deal with it as an industry and not just as a silo. So that's that.
That's great. Thank you very much, Alan, for your time. There's so much that I think we probably all want to react to in what it is you have shared with us today. We do want to push forward to our next showcase. But that was really fantastic. We had talked about how you were going to discuss making some threat intelligence actionable. One of the most interesting things that I got out of your presentation was, in some circumstances, trying to figure out when we still don't have enough information to make things actionable, and to really figure out how we can collectively choose what our sort of ethical standards in response should be as an industry, is an important job, I think, that the Secure Hosting and Alliance can choose as its path forward. So thanks for that. Let's go ahead and jump straight to our next showcase. My friend Tobias Knecht has been doing incredible work in anti-abuse for as long as I've known him, and probably much longer than that. But we've known each other for close to a decade now, and I'm a big admirer of you and your work, and I'm eager to hear your thoughts as we shift from threat intelligence to abuse reporting, and learning a little bit about the efforts that you've taken in trying to come up with some sort of standards in that area. So I'm wondering if you can go ahead and jump right into your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me. I think it's going to be more of a presentation and then maybe a discussion. We will see. So I hope my internet connection is fine and you can see my screen right now. I'm in Singapore, so I'm on the other side of the world, and my Zoom always told me.
Don't see the screen.
You don't see the screen. Give me a second. Share.
There we go.
Now you should. Yes. Now you should see something. Okay, perfect. Okay, this was not the internet connection. Okay, perfect. So thanks first of all for having me. So Toby Knecht, my name, and I'm the CEO and founder of AbuseX. And I want to talk a little bit about what we call global reporting and where it comes from and why it's here, how standardized reporting works, why it's important, and what are really the points that you need to look at as a hosting provider or ISP or telco or whatever affiliation here, obviously hosting providers, but it's the same for all those type of companies. So at the end of the day, global reporting, some people said we should have called it global notification. It's what it is, global reporting. It was 15 years, 17 years ago. And the idea came really simply. I was working for the abuse team at 1&1 Internet in Germany, and we were trying to get as much data as possible. That was already 20 years ago, because we didn't see a lot of external data. And a lot of people were complaining about us and about other hosting companies. And so you might have heard that later, and I use that term really, or I like using that term, is if you see something, say something. So if you cannot only complain about hosting providers that are doing a bad job, or ISPs, or any other kind of organization that is doing a bad job from your perspective, if you're not letting them know where they're doing a bad job and what they need to know to make, to do it better. And so that was where global reporting came in place. And so what we started doing is we said, hey, we need to make infrastructure available that everybody on the internet that has a reason to complain about abusive or fraudulent behavior can do so. That started super early on with what you can find on our website as the abuse contact database, which is a simple whois database, or it's based on the whois data for IP ranges. You throw an IP address in and you get the abuse email address out, so you know where to address it. And then there was a lot of conversations about formats, and standardizing formats is super important, because standardizing formats is making your lives way easier. And so at one point in time, we came up with something that was called XARF, and you can find information about XARF on our website, but this will then link you to GitHub, because XARF is a freely available, it's not licensed or not in any way or form IP on it. It's a free available format, JSON format, called the Extended Abuse Reporting format. That meanwhile gets a lot of traction, or got a lot of traction over the last years, and is mainly focused on reporting abusive behavior. And comparing that to what CleanDNS just said with the evidencing, in the hosting world, when we're not necessarily directly talking about domain names, the evidencing in the hosting world or in the ISP world is important, but it is not as important as it is in the domain world. And it makes a ton of sense. In the IP world, the volume that you will receive as hosting providers when you have signed up for all the right data, you have everything set up in the right way, and you have at least half a decent network together, is still so much bigger than what usually a registry or registrar sees, then that you cannot necessarily only work on evidence-based data. And so what happens is that you want to work on also on statistics. So let's say if you receive 250 reports within 10 minutes from 60 different sources, the chances that this IP address is doing something wrong at the moment is way higher than if you receive one report per day about a certain IP address. And if you see, for example, different types of reports from different sources, it makes it even more heavy from a perspective of checking what's going on. So evidencing is important, but it's not as important. And so the idea is of XARF, how can we get as many people, and also global reporting, how can we get as many people to report abusive behavior as possible? Because the more data you have from a statistical perspective, the better it is for you, and the better and easier you can make automated decisions. Because you want to make automated decisions, and as Matt from Spamhaus said earlier, automation is king in abuse management. You will not be able, if you're not a super small hosting provider, you will not be able to act in a timely manner without automating. And also going to what Matt said earlier from Spamhaus about abuse reporting, about abuse management, there's tools out there, as he mentioned, some of the tools that Spamhaus is offering. Obviously, AbuseX, the name says it, we're offering tools as well. From my perspective, do not do not try to reinvent the wheel, because there's so much other stuff that you have to focus on and that you have to do internally, structurally, legally, if you want to get a decent abuse team and abuse department up and running. There's not necessarily time to hire 5, 6, 10 data analysts and then another 10 developers that build you internal tools to automate all those things. And looking at, and even though when you're looking at XRF and XRF is widely used, you're still receiving tons of reports that are not in XRF. So at Abusix, as an example, for our product, we have roughly 1,200 different email parsers for abuse reports that we're seeing in the wild on all the systems of our customers. 1,200, and these things change on a, I would say, weekly base. So maintaining and so on and so forth is going to become a nightmare. That's why XRF is becoming more and more important. So XRF, again, it's free. Go to our website, go to GitHub. If you think something is missing in XRF, or for example, we had this conversation with Clean DNS, if, for example, certain fields are required that contain evidencing data for being able to be used in the registry field, please just come, add it, or talk to us and we can have that conversation. We want to keep it an open standard. We don't want to standardize it as an ITF standard so far, because it's just not, it is just moving too fast and too quickly, and things are changing too quickly. And even the ITF and the internet itself and the tech people there are not capable of moving fast enough to keep up with what's happening on the in the abuse world. So, and one thing that's interesting, and I just thought about getting into that piece as well, is what's going to happen and what's the future outlook on abuse notification. And it's super interesting, because sometimes you might know these days when just everything falls together and you're like, okay, this makes sense, and suddenly a lot of things make sense. So I'm at the moment in Singapore at the GASA Summit, the Asia Pacific Summit from the Global Anti-Scam Alliance. And they have a chapter now here in Singapore, which is mainly sponsored and run by MasterCard. So Recorded Future was acquired by MasterCard. And today we heard at the GASA Summit that MasterCard and a lot of other law enforcement company or law enforcement agencies and also other companies, a lot of the times was the word came up, takedown. We have phishing websites, we have malicious content, we have all those things. We're working super close with all the banks. We're having data sharing agreements with the banks. We're seeing all the transaction data from banks from here to there, and so on and so forth. But we're super crazy struggling with the takedowns. And the takedowns in most of the cases are based on ISPs or hosting providers, or mainly hosting providers. So it's very interesting that you can see that this is becoming, or this is a problem that has been around, or is being around, and is being talked about at a completely different conference on the other side of the world at the moment as well. So from that perspective, it's, you know, I just find it interesting that we will see a huge increase of abuse reporting from other agencies and from other companies. Abusix is sending at the moment roughly 10 to 12 million abuse reports every day, not only from our own data, but also from other data sources. And so there will be more data coming from most likely companies like MasterCard, or as Recorded Future, amazing offer to give data away or give data to hosting providers. Even though I think the chicken farm has to wait for quite a while as well. But I think this is a good thing. And the more data we have, the easier it will be to find all the bad stuff and to put more pressure on it. But at the end of the day, the goal has to be, how are we going to take away the bad boys' toys? Because the important thing is these guys have so much infrastructure. It's unbelievable. And we need to make sure that that infrastructure that they have on their hands is shrinking. And so to get to that at the past and then close the cycle, and going back to the things that Matt said at the beginning, which is also very interesting. We started working a while back on the initiative from Bertrand in Paris, last speaker, which I agree is the highlight here, or will be the highlight here. We talked about an idea to put something together that is looking a little bit like a checklist for abuse management on automation. And what we came out with is secureinternet.org. So this is an initiative that is being run by AbuseX and CleanDNS together, thanks to the guys from CleanDNS working with this on, or working on this with us. And a few people already know about it. So Christian, thank you for being a supporter in this area. The GASA is a supporter in this area. And what this more or less is, it's a list of, or it's a pledge, so to speak, for those that know maybe the CISA Secure Internet or Secure by Design pledge, that's what it's called, for SaaS companies. It's similar to that. What we want to have is we want to showcase the good people on the internet and good hosting providers and ISPs, but also registries and registrars that are doing a good job and doing certain things that are required to do proper abuse management. And if you go to the website, you will find it's very simple. It's a pledge that you as a company can sign. There's a few pledge goals. Matt talked already about most of them, because it's not really rocket science, and people like Matt and I and Christian that have been working in abuse teams in the past, we know what it needs and what it takes to have a good abuse desk running, or at least a basic good abuse desk running. Then we have other organizations like the I2C or like the GASA, and we're looking to other companies like ETIS and like ICANN and RIPE and so on and so forth at the moment to be supporting this effort. And then we're looking to companies, and that's maybe companies like you, and hopefully like you here in the room, that are hosting providers, to sign the pledge and then use the pledge as a kind of, here's the checklist of stuff that I need to do to be basically set up for a good abuse desk. And don't worry, read through it, but it's not rocket science. We're talking about stuff like, hey, you should have an abuse email address, and that should function. It should not bounce. And maybe it would be a good idea to have a properly staffed and a properly financed abuse team. And maybe you should train some of your employees, and maybe you should do a few other things that are absolutely common sense, even though we know common sense is not so common every once in a while, but it's just common sense stuff to set up a proper abuse desk. And then we want to make sure that the secureinternet.org pledge is talking to other, or that we can showcase other ISPs and hosting providers that are not in that situation, that they have a proper abuse desk, that we can tell them, look, here's other companies that do it and they're successful. And that's what the secureinternet.org is. So that's it from my side. Here's my email address. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Tobias. That's fantastic. And I think that the checklist that you put forward on secureinternet.org is a great starting point for our conversations when we start focusing on what baseline ethical engagement should look like from a hosting perspective when we launch Secure Hosting Alliance next January. So remember, if you're a hosting provider, to sign up between now and December for Secure Hosting Alliance, so that you can be a part of that conversation. I want to go ahead and push on, and I'm very excited about our final two showcases, but do note that there is an active Q&A where we've had a couple of questions and answers come and go in the chat. So feel free, if you have any questions along the way, to put them in the chat and we can answer them asynchronously. And my co-hosts, I'll go ahead and turn to you for questions and comments after this one, before we head into our keynote. But I'd like to push forward for now and invite my friend and colleague Graham Bunton from the NetBeacon Institute to talk a little bit more about abuse reporting and some of the work that you're doing in that field that it's I think pretty advancing the ball quite a bit.
Hi, Christian. Thank you, and thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So my name is Graham Bunton. I'm the executive director of the NetBeacon Institute, formerly known as the DNS Abuse Institute. And I'm going to talk primarily about our initiative called NetBeacon Reporter, which I think ties together nicely some of the things we've talked about today, especially from CleanDNS and AbuseX. Unsurprisingly, you'll see why in a few slides. And I know we still have a bunch more content, so I'll try and be relatively brief here. The NetBeacon Institute, if you haven't heard of us, is really a project of public interest registry who operate .org. PIR is a not-for-profit, and as part of that mission, They wanted to make the whole internet better. So created the Institute to work across the entire internet, but especially within the domain name space. So other registries and registrars to try and deal with the issues related to malicious domain names and abusive domain registrations. We don't do anything within our project that really relates to the operation of .org. So we have this sort of functional separation from the registry. And most importantly, everything we do is free. We don't charge for any of the services or tools that we offer. We do any cost recovery. It's really just a project to try and make the internet better that anybody can engage with. And I think we've heard this a little bit from both Alan and Tobias about how abuse reporting is tricky. And within the domain registration industry, it was the worst. It was just leading to endless frustration on both sides of reporters and abuse report recipients. And so for reporters, people who had abuse reports, which could be end users, internet security, intellectual property, reporting to domain registrars was really difficult. Every registrar had their own abuse reporting page in a different place on their website, different contacts, different forms, different evidence standards. It was, and 2,700 ICANN accredited registrars. That made it really difficult to do any sort of abuse reporting at scale. On the other side, we had domain registrars who were receiving unevidenced, duplicative, unactionable abuse reports, often for domains that didn't belong to them or for harms that weren't appropriate for them to mitigate. And so they're spending all day, every day, triaging thousands of abuse reports for very little benefit in making the internet any safer. And so they felt like they were doing boatloads of work and getting very little credit for it. And the people trying to report abuse to them are really frustrated that it seems like domain registrars weren't doing anything. I focus more here on registrars and registries, although both have a role to play in the ecosystem, but it's primarily registrars who take action at the domain level rather than registries. So in the middle of this, everybody's really frustrated and bad things are staying online. And the ICANN community and elsewhere were coming up with this sort of idea for really the way to solve this is to put something in the middle, to build a conduit. And so that's what we went ahead and did. We built a conduit to sit in the middle of people who have abuse reports and the domain registries and registrars who can do something about those abuse reports. And so with the help of Clean DNS, we built NetBeacon Reporter. So it's a series of APIs, also a web form that anybody can use to report abuse into us. We apply evidence standards. We enrich those abuse reports by checking the domain name submitted against sources of domain intelligence. And then we distribute those automatically to ICANN accredited domain registrars and participating CCTLDs. And so we've been running this now for pretty close to 3 years, I think, at this point. And so far, so good. We've done somewhere north of 50,000 abuse reports, which doesn't sound like it's anything close to Tobias's daily numbers, but does represent a substantial portion of the malicious domain registrations, I think, on the internet. And we're now doing thousands a month. We've got 15 of the largest, some of the largest CCTLDs participating, UK, DE, AU, CA. And we're distributing these reports in a standardized fashion so that registrars can choose to receive them in either XR or human readable format. And so they can choose to do that however they want. And we provide a mechanism for registrars who receive these reports to tell us if that report was good or bad. And that allows us to try and keep this service working as it should and the quality of abuse reports high. And so it seems to be working very nicely. We have happy abuse reporters. We have happy abuse report recipients and registrars and registries, and bad stuff is coming offline. Successful. But, and the big but, is that abuse requires disruption at multiple layers of infrastructure. We can't just be taking domains down while the actual content is still live, and a bad guy can go register another domain name and point it at that content again. So we need to increase the collaboration across the layers of internet infrastructure. And how do we do that? Well, what we do is we add web hosts and CDNs first to the list of abuse report recipients. And this is in dev right now. I expect this to be live within the next couple of weeks, so that when we take an abuse report for a malicious domain name, we're simultaneously reporting it to the hosts as well as to the domain registrar, so that we can attempt to get both pieces of infrastructure down at the same time. And this, I think, is a really exciting development for us, that we can begin to, for free, enable this sort of activity across the ecosystem. Next in line after web hosts and CDNs is going to be email service providers, so we can begin to tackle that front, and other pieces of internet infrastructure not included in this stack. As we continue to build out this functionality, it allows us to build escalation paths as well. So the more abuse we can run through our conduit, which is not an abuse management service, and I should make that clear. We're not trying to get into the business of managing those abuse reports. Well, all we want to do is make sure that the right abuse reports go to the right people who can deal with them in a fashion with enough evidence that they can take that action. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the people supporting our work. We've heard from two of them today, three of them today. Clean DNS donated a whole bunch of the underlying technology and continues to develop it in partnership with us. We're working with AbuseX to conduct this abuse reporting to host function. And Spamhaus and Serval have both donated access to their data sets, so that when abuse reports come through, we can take that domain name and check it against those lists, as well as things like Google Safe Browsing, abuse.ch, and a few other sources, so that those abuse reports, registries, hosts, registrars receive, we've shifted that investigatory burden from them into the service itself. So it's been a pretty fun project so far, and pretty rewarding in that we can really see the difference it's beginning to make across the ecosystem. There's my name and our website. Please feel free to reach out and contact us, and I'll pass it back to you, Christian. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I think that it really will up-level the work in anti-abuse in this segment and across the internet's infrastructure. And so I'm happy to have learned more about it today, so that we can use that as we try to figure out the best points of engagement to focus on when the Secure Hosting Alliance starts, so that we can try to do the best we can to make sort of the most actionable benefit of making the hosting spaces as good as we can make it increase the efficiency and quality of hosting as best we can. I'd like to turn to my co-hosts to see if you have any reactions to Graham's presentation or any of the things that you've heard today. We're about to get into our keynote presentation, and I wanted to get your reflections on everything that we've heard today.
Sure, I can start out. I think that what was interesting to me about the presentations is there's a lot of really actionable information that hosts have to choose from and to ingest. I think that there's a really great opportunity here for creating a way to begin to ingest the information in a way that makes sense for hosts who are in a lot of ways different than registrars and registries.
Any thoughts, TJ, before we move on to our final presentation?
Not really. Thanks, everyone, and let's do it.
Okay, great. So I am very excited to have a conversation as we close out with Bertrand de la Chapelle. We've heard a lot about how excited we are about the work that you have been doing, and we want to learn about it. What I had sort of said before, just to recap, because it was a while ago, I think that you're interested in figuring out how we can collectively find a path to address how everybody can agree to where abuse should go within the ecosystem. I'm eager to hear what that means. But what we are hoping is that we can bring hosting providers to the table for that as part of the Secure Hosting Alliance. There hasn't traditionally been a collective hosting industry voice, and that's what we can hope to bring to the table for that with you. But please, would you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the initiative that you're working on?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. I hope everybody is hearing me correctly. So my name is Bertrand Lachapelle. I'm the executive director of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. We've been working, among other things, for more than 10 years now with the community of infrastructure providers, and particularly DNS operators. And we've seen the emergence and the maturation of the discussions regarding addressing abuses, and particularly in the context of ICANN, around the DNS operators, and the amendments that have been adopted. But what I want to do today is to broaden a little bit the landscape and to talk in the context of the interactions here with you from the hosting community. And thank you for having stayed until now. Basically, when you look at the internet, which is a general system, a unique creation of humankind, it is the result of the efforts by numerous independent technical actors at several layers of the stack. And they are successfully managing this infrastructure thanks to shared protocols. Meanwhile, as we've been discussing during this call, the number of abuses online is extremely important. They have to be addressed at different levels of the stack. It is an increasing burden, also because of the growth of regulatory requirements. The scale of the problem is massive, and it's been mentioned several times that a level of automation is required. And the creation of the NetBeacon Institute, which in large part came from some of the work that we facilitated, and we're extremely happy about this, show that basically addressing abuses online is an information game. It is about data. And it requires efforts by actors across the infrastructure stack to not only disrupt the abuses, but also to remediate the abuses. As Graham mentioned earlier, if you have an action at the level of the DNS, but the site remains online, it is not really properly addressing the abuse. This means basically that coordination is needed, that it is beneficial for the global security of the internet, because also action at one level can have consequences at another level. And when we're talking about hosting providers, the fact that DNS operators are likely to take more actions as the result of some of the decisions that have been taken within ICANN may mean that there are a certain number of impacts for their client, and that communication between the different layers of the stack is important. The problem is, and we are very happy to see the initiative by the I2C to bring together more structured manner, in a more structured manner, the hosting community. There is no ongoing dialogue space between the different actors of the stack, between the DNS operators, with the hosting providers, with the CDN operators, the large cloud providers, when this communication is essential to improve the efficiency of anti-abuse measures and actions. One of the problems is that this dialogue cannot really take place within the existing structures, and particularly ICANN, which has a very limited mandate and a very limited community. And there's a goal, and I like the heading of this concluding intervention. There's a goal and there's an objective of unsiloing and building bridges between the silos to ensure that there is good communication. This has led through an initiative that has been started a few months ago to the idea of bringing together and creating a space to bring together these operators, the DNS operators, the hosting providers, cloud operators, CDNs, to have an opportunity to discuss and exchange and bring together those actors towards a common objective. This initiative is called the Internet Infrastructure Forum, and it has basically the goal of bringing together actors who share a common objective, which is to improve the coordination of anti-abuse efforts among infrastructure operators in their respective roles and capacities. And this dimension of the respective roles and capacities is a very important dimension, because there are different responsibilities and different ways to address abuses across the stack. In a nutshell, the goal of this Internet Infrastructure Forum, which is a new initiative that has been started by, with the support of a certain number of DNS operators, but also in cooperation with i2C, ECHO, and also Clean DNS, and a few other partners, and is facilitated by Internet as Jurisdiction Policy Network. The goal of this Internet Infrastructure Forum is to provide this community with basically four opportunities. One, and it's already been the case a little bit during this call, is to allow to share information and get data about trends, be it trends in abuses, but also trends in regulatory evolutions, which are an important factor. The second element is, as I was mentioning, the roles and responsibilities and capacities, getting a better understanding of who can do what, and as many have mentioned, how to make sure that the right information goes to the right actors at the right time so that they can take the right action according to their capacities and the type of abuses that is being addressed. The third element is to increase the sharing of practices and operational elements. Tobias was mentioning the question of formats, and Graham as well. But there's also the question of what are the policies that those different actors embed, the notion of how to enable a better understanding of what the acceptable use policies can and should be. And finally, there are a certain number of very concrete elements that I call issues of common interest or concern that have to be discussed on an ongoing basis to help and facilitate the communication and improve also the daily operations. In a nutshell, there are two types of benefits in bringing this new forum together and to existence. There's a direct benefit, I would say, for the different participants and the hosting providers that we're addressing today, which is to improve with the most efficient way the capacity of their abuse desks. And I saw and I want to keep a little bit of time, because there was a very interesting question in the Q&A chat regarding how to sell the efforts and the necessary burden that is required from operators to address abuses in a way that will improve the reputation of the industry and reduce abuses. But the fact that there is this element regarding the reputation of the industry is also bringing an indirect benefit for the whole community and the whole industry regarding the message that this joint initiative or this bottom-up effort, the message that it is sending towards public authorities, because it is a way to ensure that whatever regulatory framework or whatever obligations that are being imposed on the operators to address abuses are as proportionate and as appropriate to the actual abuses and to the actual dangers. So it is an extremely important thing to have industry-led effort that will provide a space also for engaging public authorities later on, so that the dialogue is around solving the common problem of addressing abuses rather than the traditional battle between public authorities and private actors. So in short, the next steps are we will organize a first convening of a limited number of actors by invitation at the beginning of February 2025, which is a way to bring the actors in the first gathering of this Internet Infrastructure Forum to shape what it is going to become. And the goal is to bring together the ones who are the most engaged, the most committed. And I think if you have attended this session today, it shows your dedication. And so if you adhere to the objective of improving the coordination of anti-abuse efforts, if you see the benefit, or if you want to understand better how this can be improved, please reach out to Christian and I2C in general, or to myself and Yulia Kalpokiene, who is also in the call today. And we will be happy to have a discussion with you to tell you more about this initiative around the Internet Infrastructure Forum. And we're looking forward to interacting with you and talking about how to improve collectively the ways we address abuses and reduce them.
Thank you, Bertrand. Thank you so much. I am very excited about the work that you are doing and that we get to collaborate with you on. I don't think, from my perspective, you can't understate the value of the idea of industry pulling together a framework on which we should be collectively addressing anti-abuse. I'm surprised that it doesn't already exist, but the fact that we can go out there and give voice to that is something I'm very excited about. I am also very excited that because we are pulling together the Secure Hosting Alliance at this time, we can endeavor to give more of a hosting-focused voice to the efforts that you're building within the Internet Infrastructure Forum. So I'm very excited about that. I would love to see if either of my co-hosts have any questions for you.
I don't have any questions, but I want to be extremely supportive of this endeavor. I cannot emphasize how important it is for folks across the globe to get together to engage in this kind of information sharing opportunity. So that's no questions, just a yes, please.
That's great. And Bertrand, you had noted that earlier in our conversation, somebody had put a very good question into the chat, and that was, how do we get C-level support for this within our companies? How can we ensure that collectively people are hosts especially are prioritizing this in the way that they spend their time and money? DJ, I know that you responded to that in the chat. Do you think it's worth making a note about that or two as we close out?
I think somebody else responded as well, and yeah, so I think just assessing your organization's risk appetite and just trying to estimate what can happen, I think that would help to put things into perspective, and then you'll see whether it's worth the effort. I'm
Yes.
pretty positive that it will be worth the effort, but you know.
I couldn't agree more. I want to go ahead and I want to close out with a plug. And I want to thank everybody for their time today. I believe more than I did even when we were going into this talk that we have a tremendous opportunity in pulling the hosting industry together because there's so much good work that's already out there that we can tap into and make an important contribution to by building a collective voice for the web hosting industry. So if you have not already done so, reach out to us to start to join the Secure Hosting Alliance. We are gathering founding members between now and December, and we will be launching in January. So now is the time to get involved as a hosting provider. Now is the time to reach out to us if you want to learn anything more about any of the people that you've heard speak today, particularly if you'd like to learn more about Bertrand's important efforts with the Internet Infrastructure Forum. So please reach out. Let's continue this conversation, and I am very thankful for everybody's time and attention today, including our incredible speakers. Thanks to you all. And with that, thank you for having spent 2 hours with us today learning about anti-abuse efforts in the web hosting industry.
2 hours flew by really, really fast. Thanks everyone for your time.
I agree. Great content. Thanks, everybody.